I knew something was off when I walked into the server room and found my desk plant dead, wilted, brown, and limp like it had just given up. I hadn't even watered the damn thing in a week, and yet somehow it still managed to die under fluorescent lights and passive-aggressive post-its. That's what it felt like working at Nexora these days. A slow, polite suffocation under the weight of someone else's praise. My name's Joyce. I've been at this company for 6 years. For the past 8 months, I've been living and breathing code, refining a predictive logistics algorithm that could shave millions off the company's supply chain costs. Sexy, I know. But trust me, in the world of logistics, that kind of thing gets investors throwing money like it's a Vegas poker table. I was the one who figured out the dynamic lead time recalculation. The one who rewrote the entire heuristics model after Derek, our charming, well-moisturized CTO, called my version too technical for the demo. He made a lot of things simpler, which is his way of saying mine now. But I let it slide. Because when you're the quiet genius in the room, you learn to pick your battles. We were in a Tuesday stand-up when it first clicked. Derek stood at the whiteboard, pointing to a flowchart I had designed down to the pixel. He was calling it our team's breakthrough and smiling like he'd found the answer under his couch cushions. I watched the room nod along, their eyes glued to him while my coffee cooled in my hand. Then, after the meeting, an intern named Lexi leaned over and whispered, "So, are you going to be listed on the patent?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She looked at me like I'd asked what day it was. "You're the one who built it, right?" And just like that, the seed was planted. I had assumed, stupidly, that of course I'd be on the patent. I mean, why wouldn't I be? Real quick. If you've been in my shoes, grinding in the background while someone else cashes the checks, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. 90% of you listen without subscribing, and yeah, it matters more than you think. It lets our team keep peeling back these kinds of stories. So go on, click the thing, I'll wait. Okay, good, great, back to the hellfire. The first real red flag came a few weeks later, buried inside an IT ticket I wasn't supposed to see. It was a changelog request to restrict access to the patent documentation folder for everyone but legal, Derek, and two junior engineers I barely knew. I tried opening the folder out of curiosity. It was gone from my view. No warning, no explanation. Just vanished like my name from Derek's vocabulary. I asked him about it during a coffee break. He gave me his usual half-laugh, full of that tech bro charm. "Oh yeah, the folder thing. It's just a new permissions policy legal's rolling out. You're good, Joyce? Everything's been submitted with all the right names. Don't worry." Except I wasn't worried, I was insulted. That man could lie with the confidence of a televangelist selling doomsday insurance. Then came the office grapevine. You know the one. The hallway echo chamber where things people shouldn't say get said just loud enough. I was walking past the exec suite when I heard one of the VPs mutter, "Glad we cleaned up the IP before the board got involved." That phrase, "cleaned up the IP," hit me like a brick through a stained glass window. From that moment on, I stopped assuming. I started keeping private copies of my code with timestamps. I pulled my Git logs. I exported Slack threads where Derek explicitly asked me to rewrite the predictive layer because your version's too advanced for sales. I even printed a few emails, because if there's one thing that doesn't mysteriously get deleted when you need it most, it's paper. Still, I kept showing up. Still smiled through meetings. Still clapped politely when Derek demoed my architecture to the advisory board, because I'd learned something more valuable than any algorithm. Let a man like Derek think he's won, and he'll write his own downfall in ink. By month 5, the hype around the launch was hitting a fever pitch. Champagne was ordered. Invitations were sent. One of the junior engineers got featured in a company blog post titled "Young Innovators Leading the Future of Logistics." That same kid once asked me how to install a Python library without deleting his system files. And still, I waited, because the most dangerous person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one quietly taking notes. A week after Lexi's offhand question and Derek's oily reassurance, I got an email at 9:17 a.m. sharp. "Team-wide permissions update," it said in the subject line. Looked routine. I clicked. Legal was streamlining access to protect sensitive documentation ahead of launch. Nothing about who requested the change. Nothing about what we were now locked out of. But I clicked through out of habit, tried to open the folder where the patent drafts had lived for months, and got the lovely message, "Access denied." No prompt. No password field. Just a digital brick wall where my work used to live. It was subtle, clean, surgical almost, like someone had planned for this silence. No fanfare, no one talking. Just a new normal that smelled like bleach and cover-up. So I did what any mildly paranoid, professionally gaslit woman would do. I opened my private backup folder. I had started keeping one after Derek once accidentally deleted my branch history during a code merge. Claimed it was a glitch. Said Git can be weird sometimes, like the software itself had developed a grudge against me. Ever since, I kept my own records, offsite, offline, and obsessively dated. There, tucked in a thumb drive shaped like a rubber duck because irony helps with ulcers, were the original iterations of the logistics engine. My code, my logic, my annotation trail with file creation dates. And let me tell you something about the difference between ownership and authorship. Authors remember the why behind every line. I walked over to Derek's desk, fake smile holstered, and asked, "Hey, did legal finish submitting the provisional patent?" He didn't look up from his monitor, just kept scrolling. "Yup, all squared away. All the right names are on it, you're good." "All the right names?" "Yeah." He finally glanced at me. His face did that thing. Twitched for half a second like a weasel caught mid-fart. "Legal's handling it. You know how they get around launch season. Overkill mode, right? Overkill mode. The same mode that stripped my access to the exact folder where the work I bled for had lived." I played dumb, nodded, smiled, walked away. But inside, the ground had already started to shift. I'd worked with legal before. They didn't make changes like that without direction from someone upstairs. And Derek. Derek wasn't just upstairs, he was the one who picked the wallpaper and installed the smoke detectors. That night, I couldn't sleep. My brain kept looping the intern's question. "Are you going to be on the patent?" That wasn't an innocent ask. It was a reminder. A subtle flare sent into a sky no one was watching. And now I couldn't unsee it. The next day, I brought lunch down to the South Terrace, the one spot execs used when they wanted to casually brainstorm in public. I didn't sit close, just close enough. Sure enough, two senior VPs were there, laughing over iced coffees and legacy bonuses. One of them said, "Glad we cleaned up the IP before the board got involved." The other smirked. "You mean before Derek's girl got wise?" I didn't choke, didn't flinch. Just slid my sandwich back into its wrapper and walked to the bathroom, where I sat in a stall with the light off for 20 minutes. That was the moment it all clarified. I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being erased. They weren't waiting for me to notice. They were counting on me not to. So I flagged every version of my work, algorithm files, change logs, emails, even the rejected sketches I'd saved in a fit of late-night insecurity. Then I opened Slack and started downloading conversations. Not the obvious ones, no, those would be scrubbed. I wanted the micromanipulations, the gaslight trails. Maybe just simplify this section comments that all funneled back to Derek taking credit for what he didn't understand. By Thursday, the vibe in the office shifted again. Derek stopped making eye contact. The junior devs looked anxious. Someone from HR dropped by my desk and asked how I was adjusting to the new team structure. New team structure? I hadn't been told about one. I nodded. "Fine, thanks," smiled, closed my laptop. But inside, I wasn't fine. I was sharpening. Because if there's one thing tech bros forget, it's that silence is an agreement. Sometimes it's just the sound of a woman loading ammo. The coffee shop was one of those Instagrammable spots with overpriced matcha and hanging plants that looked like they'd weep if you touched them wrong. I didn't pick it for the ambience. I picked it because it was neutral ground. No Nexora regulars, no chance of bumping into someone who might report back to Derek with a snide. Guess who's grabbing lattes with legal these days? Ava slid into the booth across from me in her usual blazer over jeans combo, a to-go cup already in hand, hair up in that perfect bun that said I'm not trying while actually trying very hard. She used to sit 2 floors down from engineering before legal got moved during the last office shuffle, and though we hadn't talked in months, she smiled like it was old times. "God, I've missed these little chats," said, brushing her sunglasses onto her head. "Feels like we only ever see each other during compliance week. Or fire drills," I joked. We talked about nothing for 10 minutes. Her dog's surgery, my neighbor's new obsession with drone gardening, the pumpkin cold brew. But the whole time my heart was pounding like it had backup singers. Then I leaned in a little and asked casually, "So, how's it going with the patent filings? Must be chaos with the product launch coming." Blinked, "Which filing?" "You know," I said, keeping my tone breezy, "the one for the logistics engine." Derek mentioned it got filed a while ago. Her smile faltered, not a twitch, an actual collapse. Her face went blank for half a beat too long, and her fingers tightened around her cup like she was prepping for turbulence. "Wait," she said slowly. "You mean the predictive routing patent?" "Yeah, I thought you signed already." I felt the words thud in my chest like a dropped hammer. "No," I said, my voice so calm I surprised myself. "I didn't." "You're not listed." I shook my head. Her jaw worked behind her lips, grinding on some invisible decision. "That doesn't make any sense. You authored the base model, right? Your name was all over the dev notes when I reviewed the draft. Derek said final versions would be routed to you," and she stopped. Realized something? Oh, that tiny word, sharp as a knife, was the moment it stopped being paranoia and started being proof. My chest burned. All the time I'd poured into this company, those 2 a.m. bug patches, the time I missed my sister's baby shower to rebuild an integration from scratch, the months I spent crafting something only I could have built, and someone decided to cut my name out like a blemish on an old photo. "Can I ask when it was filed?" I said. "Roughly?" She looked around, lowered her voice. "A couple months ago, right after the internal product audit. Derek pushed it through fast, said it needed to be clean for investors. There were red lines on your contribution logs, but I thought that meant legal was consolidating credits, not removing them." Clean, that word again. That corporate cologne they spray over theft to make it smell like strategy. I swallowed the heat in my throat. "Do you still have access?" She hesitated. Her thumb tapped the side of her coffee cup in thought. "I shouldn't," she said, "but I could check, discreetly." That was Ava's way of saying yes. I leaned back and looked out the window as a city bus wheezed past, trailing soot and a woman yelling into her phone. I wasn't thinking about buses. I was thinking about that provisional filing, about the valuation pitch I'd overheard Derek rehearsing in the hallway, about the junior engineers suddenly being looped into investor briefings while I got left off the call calendar. It wasn't about recognition anymore. It was about leverage, about who had the IP when the board signed that Series C term sheet. If my name wasn't on that patent, then Derek could present himself as the sole creator, which meant he owned the equity clause. He got the IP bump in his bonus metrics. And I got another branded water bottle at the launch party and a 3% raise. I stood up. Thank you, Ava. Really? She nodded. I'll let you know what I find. We walked out together, but at the corner, we went separate ways. She looked over her shoulder. Joyce? Yeah, be careful. I smiled. I've been careful, that's the problem. I walked the long way back to the office. Past the sushi place where Derek once pitched me the opportunity of a lifetime. Past the alley where the sales team vaped during breaks like high schoolers with corporate cards. Past the glowing, glassy tower where I had built something real, something precise and beautiful, and where someone else was trying to sell it with his initials. Only this time I wasn't going to let him. I went home that night and opened every folder I'd ever touched. I cross-checked file versions, tracked email attachments, mapped contribution commits across branches. I printed things, annotated. I sat in silence, headphones off, lights dim, the weight of betrayal folding into the lines of my jaw. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just kept going. Because when someone like Derek builds a story that doesn't include you, the best revenge is making sure yours has documentation. The gaslighting started with a compliment. You're the glue that holds this place together, Derek said during the Monday stand-up, flashing that can smile and chin nod combo he probably practiced in front of bathroom mirrors. Honestly, Joyce is the reason this product works. Heads turned toward me, polite claps, a few awkward smiles. The intern beamed like she'd just watched a Lifetime movie where the woman finally got her flowers. Inside, I felt nothing. Because 5 minutes later, while I was refilling my coffee, I overheard him in the hallway telling product, we had to simplify a lot of Joyce's back-end logic, brilliant stuff, but too dense for scalability. Luckily, I've been working directly with the new devs to clean it up. Clean it up. Again with the cleaning. Derek treated my work like a garage full of outdated furniture. Like I should thank him for throwing it out and keeping the house presentable. By Wednesday, HR reached out. Just a quick check-in, Joyce. Let's align on your current responsibilities. The subject line read, Q for role clarification. No context, no agenda, just a neutral-sounding ambush disguised as a coffee chat. I sat across from Melanie from HR, clipboard ready, half smile loaded like a tranquilizer dart. We're just trying to make sure everyone's aligned before launch, she said. You've been such a cornerstone, and we want to ensure your energy is focused where it's most valuable. Where's that exactly? I asked. She blinked. Oh, well, Derek mentioned you might be stepping back a bit from core feature work, maybe focusing more on mentorship or documentation? I didn't laugh, but I felt my lip twitch. Funny, I said. I didn't realize I was stepping back. She glanced down at her clipboard. Maybe I misheard. No, honey, you heard exactly what you were told. I walked out of that meeting with two truths. One, they were trying to soften the landing before they shoved me off the stage. Two, I had to stop playing defense. That evening I stayed late, not unusual for me, but this time I wasn't coding. I was hunting. The printer room was dark, humming like an unsupervised confession booth. I had been tipped off by Ava earlier that week. Check the internal patent prep docs, she'd whispered over Signal. Sometimes they do print reviews before final filing, so I searched the discard tray. Stacks of printouts, test pages, someone's failed attempt at formatting a presentation in landscape. And then, buried in a cluster of draft sheets, a document titled Nexora Provisional Patent Draft V3, PDF. I slid it out, flipped through. There it was, core routing logic. Initial model with a description I knew word for word, because I'd written it. Late nights, jamming granola bars into my mouth and squinting at recursive logic until my eyes crossed. Only now it said, Author D. Langford, Derek's name, his initials, his authorship. I stood there frozen for a second, the hum of the printer chewing into my skull. Then I calmly folded the printout, slid it into my bag, and walked back to my desk. First thing I did, scan it, high-res, every page. Then I logged the timestamp, pulled the printer metadata, backed it all up to 3 separate locations, an encrypted cloud vault, a password-protected USB, and a private email I hadn't touched since grad school. I opened my terminal and ran a checksum hash on the document, immutable proof. No one could claim I forged it. The file was born in this building, on our network, with metadata tying it back to our internal IP range. Let Derek try to dance around that. From that moment, I documented everything. Every meeting invite, every hallway conversation, every Slack message, even the emoji reactions. I used a screen recorder when I was working on anything patent adjacent. I set a rule in Outlook to forward any message containing IP, filing, Series C, or equity to a hidden archive. I didn't trust anyone, and I sure as hell didn't trust Derek. He must have sensed it. The shift. The way I stopped answering in group threads and started replying in separate DMs. The way I smiled in meetings like I was planning his eulogy in my head. At one point, he caught me near the vending machines. Hey, he said, just wanted to say, you've been really focused lately. It's good to see. I smiled back, just trying to stay in my lane. He laughed. Come on, Joyce. I've always been more than that. And for the first time in weeks, I let him see it, the flicker of rage under my calm, just a glimpse. I used to think that, I said. Then I walked away, because the quiet war had begun, and I wasn't fighting for credit anymore. I was fighting to remind them I built the engine, and if they kept pushing, I'd be the one to stop it from running. Corporate warfare doesn't start with screaming. It starts with silence, sudden calendar exclusions, vanished threads, questions that once came directly now trickle through support channels. And my favorite, meetings were scheduled to times you must have missed. It's the kind of passive aggression that HR calls restructuring, but feels more like being erased in real time, pixel by pixel. By week 7, I wasn't just off the radar, I was off the grid. The logistics engine, the one I had architected from napkin sketch to deployment, is now being driven by Derek and his 2 codependent junior devs who still thought version control was a suggestion. My commits were untouched, my suggestions ignored, my name slowly phased out of project summaries. I'd become a ghost in my own code base. The investors were starting to circle, sniffing for the next big thing. I watched from the sidelines as Derek prepped shiny decks, polished demos, and led Q&A sessions without me. The engine still ran, my engine, but he'd renamed core modules to his pet buzzwords and layered on just enough jargon to make it sound like a group effort. Meanwhile, word around the office was that I was taking a step back. Derek's phrase of the week, Joyce is a bit burned out. We're letting her refocus on mentorship. Refocus my ass? I wasn't burned out. I was being airbrushed out. And that's when I reached out to Carla. She worked in compliance, department most engineers ignore unless someone screws up procurement or accidentally deploys live user data into the training set. But I knew Carla from my early days at Nexora. She used to run tabletop risk simulations with engineering before the company grew too bloated for cross-functional collaboration. We'd bonded over lukewarm bagels and mutual distaste for forced fun offsites. I pinged her on Slack. Me. Hey, quick cue. Got time to walk through a couple risk points tied to the logistics pipeline? Carla, sure. Want to chat today? I dropped by her office that afternoon. She had 3 monitors glowing and a drawer full of protein bars organized like evidence in a courtroom. I framed the conversation like I always did, with precision. Just wanted your perspective, I said, pointing to a sample diagram I'd prepped. There are a few potential data exposure flags tied to how the core engine is being described in recent investor materials. Her eyes flicked across the printout. You mean the patent? I blinked. You've seen it? Derek flagged it to legal last month, said it was urgent. I nodded, masking my disgust. Right, just curious about a few ownership attributions. There's some inconsistent authorship appearing across branches, and I wanted to get ahead of it, just in case it becomes a due diligence issue. Her face changed just a little. You have the logs? I brought samples. I handed over a folder. Inside, file names that contradicted Derek's authorship claims, Slack exports showing feature discussions traced back to me, Jira tasks reassigned last minute to junior engineers for optics. None of it screamed fraud on its own. But together, it formed a whisper loud enough to echo. She skimmed the pages. You documenting this somewhere safe? Let's just say I've got backups of the backups. She leaned back in her chair, brow furrowed. You want this escalated? Not yet, I said, just logged. In case the board ever asks questions. Understood, no promises, no alliances declared. But that was the thing about Carla, she played a long game. If shit went nuclear, I knew she wouldn't be caught off guard. As I left, I dropped one last breadcrumb. Email recap with the subject line, product risk, authorship clarification threads, just enough to timestamp the conversation, just enough to survive a subpoena. Back in the office, Derek was holding court with one of the Series C investors, a guy in a charcoal suit who looked like he slept in boardrooms and drank IPOs for breakfast. They were laughing. Derek clapped him on the back, gesturing at a screen showing the logistics dashboard. My dashboard. And then the investor asked something too far for me to hear, but Derek's response floated across the open floor. Oh, Joyce? Yes, she's shifting focus, needed space. You know how engineers get when they hit the burnout wall. I didn't flinch. I just walked past like I didn't hear it, every step quieter than the one before. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed. Ava, one line, no emojis. No filler. Ava, meet me before the launch party. Stared at the message for a full minute. My hands went still on the keyboard, because I knew what that meant. There was something she couldn't say over Signal, something she didn't dare type. Whatever was coming next, it wasn't just the next move. It was the start of the end game. The sky had that eerie shade of late afternoon orange, the kind that makes everything feel staged, like the whole world knows something you don't. I waited our corner table in a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon, printer ink and lawyers trying to hide panic behind chai lattes. Ava walked in fast, no wave, no small talk, just slid into the booth and opened her satchel like she was disarming a bomb. She didn't speak for the first 30 seconds, just pulled out a manila folder, flipped it open, and laid the pages between us like a tarot spread. Redacted, watermarked, legalese in 12-point font. It was the kind of document that made normal people glaze over, but I saw it immediately. The patent, my patent, except it wasn't. I leaned in slowly. Page 2, authors and contributors, right there, in black and white, Derek Langford, CTO. Alongside him, two names that made my stomach twist. Adam Patel, Emily Cho, both recent hires, both on H-1B visas, both eager to please and unlikely to make waves if someone told them, sign here, it's just a formality, not mine. My name wasn't just absent. It had never even been penciled in. I looked at Ava. She watched me carefully like a doctor waiting for post-op reaction. Not pitying, not soft, just bracing. Why, I asked, my voice low. She tapped the margin of the page. Filed 2 weeks before the launch invites went out. He backdated the timestamps. Forged your e-signature on an earlier draft to make it look like you had seen it months ago. I stared at the paper. I'd been in the building that day, probably writing a cleanup script or patching a memory leak while Derek was walking this through legal like he was Picasso signing a forgery. You're sure? Positive. I cross-checked the signature hash. It doesn't match the one legal has on file for you. She paused. This wasn't a clerical error. This was deliberate. He locked you out, scrubbed you clean, then retrofitted the timeline. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just burned, quietly. The kind of burn that smolders behind your ribs and fuels clarity instead of chaos. Of course he did it before the investor push. Of course he needed pliable names on the patent to secure his equity bonus. My presence complicated the narrative. Too senior, too smart, too documented. I could have argued royalties. I could have forced a co-inventor clause. I could have sunk the entire valuation with one well-timed clause dispute, unless I didn't exist. I leaned back, air sharp in my lungs. What happens now? Ava closed the folder with a soft snap. Now, you tell me what you've got, so I did. I laid it all out. The private backups, the Slack exports, the Jira audit trail, the recorded meeting where Derek claimed authorship in front of junior devs, the scanned draft from the printer room with his initials on my work. I even handed over the checksum hashes with digital certificates proving when my original logic models were written. Ava didn't blink once. When I finished, she picked up her phone, tapped a few times, then set it face down on the table. I'm sending this to General Counsel, she said, quietly, off calendar. I know the partner leading our IP filings, she's not going to like being lied to. I nodded. Good, you okay? No. A long pause, she didn't press. I watched people filter past the window, engineers with laptop bags, interns in team hoodies, executives pretending they didn't recognize the baristas. All of them moving through a company that ran on my work and Derek's fiction. But the story was shifting now. He had written me out of it, and now I was writing myself back in with footnotes and a time-stamped reckoning. As we got up to leave, Ava paused at the door. Launch parties in 3 days. I know. Are you going? I zipped my jacket, wouldn't miss it, because the next time Derek tried to tell a room full of board members that he built the engine, I'd be there to watch him choke on his own signature. They held the launch party in a rented ballroom with enough polished marble and LED uplighting to make you forget it was all built on stolen work. Gold accents, champagne pyramids, shrimp skewers served on slate plates like we were all too classy for napkins. There was a live jazz trio pretending it wasn't a glorified tech circle jerk. And towering over it all, on 3 massive screens, was the phrase, Nexora Logistics Engine launching the future. My engine, Derek's branding. I arrived exactly 48 minutes late. That wasn't an accident. By then, the press photos had already been taken. Derek had already given his 3rd variation of the what inspired us to innovate speech, where he dropped just enough buzzwords to make the VCs nod sagely and the junior staff pretend they understood. I walked in alone, black dress, no badge, no laptop, just presence. Heads turned, not dramatically, but noticeably. The kind of turn people make when they're not sure if they're supposed to smile or pretend you don't exist. I smiled for them, just enough to make it weird. Ava spotted me first. She was in the far corner, holding a glass of sparkling water, flanked by 2 members of her compliance team. They weren't mingling, they were watching. The same way surgeons watch vital signs before making the first incision. On the opposite end of the room, near the curved stage and all its startup theater nonsense, stood board advisor Charles Monroe. You could tell he was important by the way the crowd thinned around him, not out of respect, but out of fear that he might actually ask you what your department does. He clocked me immediately, and just as quickly, clocked Derek. Derek, who was glowing, sweating slightly under the lights, holding a mic like it was an Oscar acceptance speech. The crowd chuckled at something he said, probably a line recycled from the last 3 product launches he took credit for. And none of this would have been possible without the brilliance and agility of our product team, he said, voice dripping with performative gratitude. I'm especially proud of the innovation shown by our younger engineers, Adam, Emily. Stand up, guys. The 2 junior devs stood awkwardly, smiles tight. They didn't know what was coming, but they felt it. People always feel the temperature drop before a storm. I clapped politely, sipped my drink. Derek noticed. He froze for half a second, masked it with a grin. And of course, he added, pivoting with faux humility. So many people contributed along the way. Innovation isn't a solo act, it's a chorus. A chorus. The man thought he was poetic now. He scanned the room again and landed on me. He tilted his glass, smiling too wide. The smile you give a ghost you didn't expect to see. I raised mine back, toasted nothing. From across the room, Ava gave a slight nod. The kind you'd miss if you weren't looking. Derek moved on. Introduced a short video reel showcasing the journey. It was slick, polished. A timeline of screenshots, UI prototypes, beta stats, and investor soundbites. Not one frame of actual code. Not one frame of me. The room applauded. I joined in. Lightly. 2 fingers against my palm, not clapping, marking time. Then Derek stepped down from the stage, weaving through people, shaking his hand like he'd just cured supply chain cancer. He made a beeline for me. Didn't expect to see you, he said. Casual like a rattlesnake sunbathing. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. Hope you're doing okay, he added. I know the last few weeks have been intense, that's one word for it. He leaned in, voice low. Look, I know there was some confusion about the filing stuff, but this is a celebration. Let's not do the thing where I'm not doing anything, Derek, I said, tilting my head. You're the star, he exhaled. Let's just keep things professional tonight, yeah? I smiled, of course. Wouldn't want to disturb the narrative. Behind him, I saw Monroe moving. Slow, intentional, not mingling, scanning, and then the music changed. Louder, jazz replaced by synth pop. People drifted toward the buffet. The investors moved in packs. The air filled with the hum of networking and the clink of glasses. Derek leaned closer. If there's a problem, you could have just come to me. I met his eyes. Steady, you're right. His mouth twitched. I saw it then, the crack. A fraction of a second flicker of doubt. He was too smart not to feel it, too arrogant to know how to fix it. I turned away first, found a quiet place by the back bar. Let the rest of the room swirl without me, because I didn't need to steal the spotlight. I just needed to be in the room when it shifted. And that shift, it was already starting. He approached like it was a casual reunion, drink in hand, swaggering just enough to pretend he hadn't been scanning the room for me all night. The kind of walk a man does when he thinks he's still in control, but has a gut feeling that maybe, just maybe, the fuse he lit is finally meeting the dynamite. The synth pop had given way to ambient jazz again, but the crowd buzz had thinned. People were full, drunk enough to stop pretending they cared about product vision, and finally bored enough to gossip. Perfect timing. Derek raised his glass, that same bullshit smirk on his face. So he said, drawing it out like a stand-up comic warming into his set, "You finally got your name on the patent, right?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was just loud enough. I tilted my head slightly, took a sip of champagne I hadn't paid for, and looked him dead in the eyes. "What patent?" His smile faltered. A hairline fracture. The tiniest flicker of confusion blinked across his eyes, followed immediately by a clumsy laugh. "Oh, come on," he chuckled, "don't play coy." But it was too late because someone else had heard it. A woman's voice, measured, no nonsense, and very, very familiar, cut through the space like a scalpel. "Wait, then who signed it?" I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. General Counsel. One of the few people in this company who could actually kill a deal with a sentence. Derek's jaw twitched. He turned toward her slowly, as if gravity had suddenly gotten thick. "Excuse me?" he asked, trying to smile again. I don't think I caught, but she didn't smile, she didn't even blink. "You said the patent was filed with all contributors accounted for," she said. "That includes Joyce, right?" Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. Silence cracked through the room like a lightning bolt. Conversations around us died instantly, like a switch had been flipped. Forks froze midair. Someone near the cheese platter actually muttered, "Oh shit." Derek finally managed something that sounded like a laugh. "Look, I think there's been some confusion. Of course Joyce is involved. We had earlier versions, some preliminary work, and preliminary, I asked, letting my voice carry just enough. That's odd, because the routing logic you filed, line by line, it mirrors my internal builds. Now even the bartender stopped wiping glasses. Charles Monroe, the board advisor. Suddenly there, he hadn't rushed. He didn't have to. His presence was enough to change the oxygen in the room. He looked from me to Derek and said nothing, just waited. General Counsel didn't blink. "Derek," she said, "we need to talk. Right now?" He tried another laugh. "Look, can we just, this isn't the time." "We're celebrating," no, she said flatly. "We're intervening." That's when Ava stepped forward, calm, composed, holding her phone with the screen facing inward, recording, time-stamped and legal as hell. One of her team was behind her, phone angled subtly at Derek like they were taking a picture, but they weren't. They were filming. Derek's drink was still in his hand. His knuckles went white around the stem. "We've reviewed the filing," she said, eyes on him like she was dissecting him with every syllable. "There's an inconsistency between the listed contributors and the archive development logs." Someone, God bless them, let out a low whistle. "I think we should step into the side room," General Counsel said again. Not a suggestion, not even a command, a diagnosis. Derek's face had drained to a shade of off-white that clashed with his navy sport coat. His mouth opened once more, but no words came out, not a single syllable. Just the click of phone cameras, the shifting weight of witnesses. The kind of silence that wraps around a man like a noose. He glanced at me one last time, maybe hoping I'd say something. Save him. Offer him a ladder out of the hole he dug. I smiled, not cruel, not smug. Just tired. And then I stepped aside so they could walk him out of his own party. Past the screens, the champagne, the interns who once idolized him. Past Charles Monroe, who said nothing but whose gaze was heavier than any indictment. As Derek disappeared through the double doors with legal and compliance flanking him like pallbearers, the music resumed. Awkwardly, people went back to pretending they hadn't just watched a man get gutted in high def. I took another sip of champagne. It was warm now. But the taste? Sweet as hell. It took less than 2 days. 48 hours after Derek's little performance at the launch party got upstaged by his own fraud, Nexora initiated a full-blown internal audit. No soft emails, no spin. Just a cold request from legal for full access to all development files, commit histories, Slack archives, and internal permissions logs dating back 6 months. By the next morning, our office felt like a crime scene. Desks were suddenly temporarily reassigned. Derek's calendar vanished from public view. The junior engineers, Adam and Emily, didn't even show up. Rumor had it they were asked to report to legal at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp and hadn't come back since. A few brave souls tried to pretend it was business as usual, but the usual ping-pong and trail mix vibe had been replaced by silence and the faint smell of impending legal counsel. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The audit team found everything. My code, meticulously timestamped and submitted well before the provisional filing date. Slack logs where Derek asked me to restructure and clean up sections, now matched to lines in the patent with his name on them. Git commits with untouched author metadata. PDF files bearing my logic diagrams with Derek's initials stamped over top. And the final nail? My digital signature never appeared. The one on the patent filing? Forged, sloppy. Pulled from a years-old NDA and pasted into the document like no one would notice. But they did. General Counsel ran a hash comparison. Ava confirmed the document's version history. And Adam, sweet, terrified Adam, admitted under pressure that Derek had told him, "It's just for speed. We'll clean it up later." They always say that, don't they? Clean it up later. By Friday morning, Derek was suspended pending termination. His badge access revoked. His executive Slack status flipped to inactive, a digital tombstone for what was once his empire. He tried to play it off, of course, blamed miscommunication, clerical errors, even suggested that I had misunderstood my role in the prototype phase. But no one was listening anymore. The board issued a formal statement. We take IP attribution seriously. Translation: this almost tanked our Series C, and now we're scrubbing him like a toxic stain before the paperwork hits investors' desks. The 2 engineers were quietly reassigned. HR wrapped them in non-disclosure agreements and a thick layer of plausible deniability. And me. I got a 2-line email from General Counsel. Subject: patent addendum filed. Your co-inventorship status has been submitted and backdated to the original filing. Thank you for your cooperation. That was it. No parade, no bonus, no town hall where someone handed me a trophy. But a courier arrived that afternoon with a padded envelope. Inside was a copy of the updated patent certificate. My name, printed just below Derek's. Equal spacing. No asterisk. I took it back to my desk, slid it into the bottom drawer beneath a stack of old project notebooks, and closed it gently. Then I opened Slack, typed in Derek's name, clicked Edit Workspace Directory, and deleted him. No message, no drama. Just a single keystroke, and the man who spent half a year trying to write me out of my own creation was gone from the channels he once ruled like a spotlight-addicted tyrant. A few moments later, Ava sent a DM. Ava saw the directory change. Clean, me, finally, Ava drinks, me, rain, check. I've got a bug to fix. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle. Not the uncomfortable kind, this one was earned. Full, heavy in the best way. No rage, no revenge speech. Just the quiet click of truth, echoing longer than any applause, because I didn't need to yell. I just made sure the right people were listening when the story finally told itself. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.